So here we are. We're at the live version of QuickBooks, and we're going to just scroll along our ribbon here. And there, lo and behold, we see vendors. Now, when I click on that, it drops down and it offers us opportunities to click on any number of these things. And for now, and you'll see that there are other ways we can access these things from within the Vendor Center. So we're going to just start by going to the Vendor Center. And there we are. And so, as I said, from the Vendor Center, you can get to the enter bills, pay bills, all those things straight from the top of the Vendor Center. So to enter a new vendor, and you can also do them in bulk and add multiple vendors, but for now we'll just do new vendor. This gets you to the new vendor entry screen, and you just enter all of the information, and then payment, the account number, payment terms, and I can't, again, hit home hard enough that this is a really great time to do this when you first get this vendor signed up and not when you're actually going to try and complete a transaction with that vendor. As I showed you on the slide, this is the how to make that vendor inactive as opposed to deleting a vendor, which I'm not particularly fond of. It's not that you can't do it. I'm not particularly fond of that. So you can also attach things to this vendor. So, and these are, there's no information in some of these because this is the homework file that you'll be using this week to complete the assignment. But you can attach things to this vendor. So you could scan in the contract you have with the vendor, and this is really easy access. You can attach copies of statements scanned in if you would like to do that, and that's a particularly handy feature of this. But to get to your vendor center, to do edits from an already established vendor, you just go to that little, I think that's a pencil. I don't know. It looks like a pencil. We'll say that's what it is for now. And here you can make all of the changes to your vendor information on any of these screens. And I should also point out that you can create some custom fields also. And so I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to show you while we're over here. You can set tasks for yourself. You can write notes. You can also send an email directly to your vendor, and this will then keep track of your email information. So kind of a nice place to, in one concise area, track all of your communications, your information, your documents, all that related to your vendors. One more thing I forgot to show you is that this is the way that you can then filter vendors. You can see all of your vendors. You can see only your active vendors, which for us happen to be one and the same. We don't have any inactive vendors. You can choose to look at vendors with open balances, which for now, this is 0 because we haven't input any information into that. Or you can use some other custom filter. So the active vendors is the default. And there's also a tab over here that you can look at transactions, but we'll get to that later. So we're back on our PowerPoint slide, and we're going to move on to entering your bills. Now, entering the bills is not the same as paying the bills. That's something that we'll do later. When the bills come in the mail or by email, I hate getting bills by email, just as an aside. But anyway, it's the wave of the future, and I guess I just need to adapt. So this is where you will enter the information from the bill that you receive in the mail from your vendor so that you have all of that. And so then it becomes very easy to look and see who you owe money to. It will automatically default and assume it's a bill. If for some reason we returned whatever it was that we bought and they issued us a credit, this would be the place for us to note that. And so we can save and close, save and new once we've entered all this information. If we were to look at this in our double entry accounting mindset, our debit would be either an asset expense or a draw, whatever the purpose was for the purchase that we had made, and then our credit would be to accounts payable. But QuickBooks is going to do all that behind the scenes for us. So QuickBooks will automatically assume that this is an accounts payable, but we will have to tell, there's not going to be, QuickBooks isn't going to be smart enough to understand what, the vendor that we're writing the check for, whether that's for our rent or we bought something, or, so it's an asset or something of that nature. And so, and I just went through basically how to do this. So we'll go over to the live version shortly and we will do this. And so this basically talks about how to do what I do regularly, which is how to add the vendor while you're in the midst of the activity. So this is we'll call this the Michelle Kanan slide, because this is traditionally how I end up doing it. And so when I hop over there in a second, I will show you, as part of entering the bills, how that happens. Correcting errors. There are two ways to correct the error. The first is to use the find button to find the transaction. The second one, and change it. The second one is to find it, click edit, and then just delete the bill and redo it correctly. I, as a small business person, delete things all the time because I know who did it. I know that it is only me. I get really uncomfortable giving employees the level of permission that allows them to delete anything. The opportunity for fraud is rampant. So I would rather have an entry corrected or an adjusting entry made rather than something deleted and re-entered. And as we later on move on to cash controls and things like that, you will understand. And so, and I had shown you the credit memo button while we were over there. So I'm going to pause this. We'll go over to the live version and we will enter some bills. So here we are, we're in our vendor center. And again, there's two ways we can do this. We can do it without even entering the vendor center. We can go up to our ribbon and just go to the enter bills window, or we can select new transactions and enter bills. They will both take us to the very same place. One of those will just take us directly there if we do it from up here, whereas here we're already in the vendor center, and so they will both wind up in this screen. And so because I had Computer Town highlighted, that's who it auto-filled this line for me. But if I don't want vendor or Computer Town, I can choose from any of my vendors that are already listed in here, or as my regular practice is, I can also add new, and then I can go through, and now I can dig through the pile on my desk, find the contract, find the payment terms, find all those things that if I were a more organized person, I would have just done at the beginning. So, but you can do it this way. The thing that I like about this particular view that QuickBooks does, and as we get more data into these in the coming weeks, you'll be able to see this. I don't know if it'll give us anything. Oh, so it will, as you bring this vendor up, to the extent that you have information in here, it will just kind of give you some at a glance stuff, which is nice. It will also show you, and we don't have any, but it'll show you your recent transactions. You can also make some notes about this transaction, or you can go over and just look at a summary of your transactions. So it's kind of nice to kind of have this peek into what the account looks like as you are working with this particular vendor. So if we were done, we were only entering one, we would just hit save and close after we put all information in here. So then again, we put all of this in here. It's going to assume, because this is a bill, that the credit is the accounts payable. However, we've got to tell it what the debit's going to be. And remember, we can't, if we don't do that, and you'll see what happens. Let's just do, if I try and enter an amount and I don't put anything in, this would otherwise be our debit area for the vendor center. I try and just save this. It will tell me I must assign an account for this transaction. That is QuickBooks' way of telling me, hey, you are going to be out of balance, and in fact, we won't let you go out of balance. We will not even allow this transaction to be entered, because all it's going to do is throw your accounting system off, and you're going to have to go back through and figure out at some point later why you're out of balance. So we're just not going to let you go there. So we're going to force you to choose what the appropriate is. This office supplies? Is this something else? Again, we can add new here if we realize, gee, I don't have the appropriate account for this, so I can make one. And I won't go into that now, but we will be doing lots of that. I can put memos here, put memos here, reference numbers. I can also put down, if I'm going to get a discount, if I pay within a certain day, then I certainly, and this one doesn't, there's no net, there's no like 210 net 30 on this, but this word 210 net 30, we would want to note the date by which we would need to pay this in order to get our 2% discount. And if we were going to turn around and bill this to a customer, so for example, you know, I send something off to the sheriff to be served on somebody, I may pay it out of my account and turn around and bill my client for it. So this would be a point at which, we don't have any customers in here, that'll come in a few weeks, but this would be a point where I could then attach this to my customer. And maybe I would want to bill the customer, maybe I would just want to keep track of it. So then I would indicate in this box after I put the customer in whether or not I was going to bill it to them or whether I was just going to keep track of it. And because this is the file you'll be working with this week, there are no transactions in here. And so I am just going to X out of this. And we do not want to record this transaction. Similarly, it won't let me do it because I didn't choose an entry for our debit anyway, so I'll just go out of that. So I'm going to stop this video here and move on to the next one.